Hello, everyone. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 4 of the Dateable AF podcast. Today, we are talking about you're not bad at communication, you're tolerating too much. When talking doesn't fix the problem. We've all felt that familiar frustration of, God, I've explained this so many times. How come it's not changing? And what we want to tell you today, friend, is that you are not confused. You are just tired. And that sometimes problems don't just need better communication, they need a different kind of boundaries.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed how you just say it louder because you're so frustrated that you're just like, oh God. Yes.
It's like people talking to someone who doesn't speak English and they just think if they say it louder,
Exactly.
or if they say it
Exactly.
with a Spanish accent.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yes. Exactly. It's true. It's just it's maddening.
If I say this louder, you're going to understand it. Yeah, I think we do that in our relationships too. So I want to be clear that this episode isn't anti-communication. My God, that is Rachel's and my message to the world is about communicating better. But sometimes communication reaches its limits and it leaves you feeling frustrated and beating your head against a wall like, what is wrong with my communication? Or I just, I need to learn to talk about this in a different way. And we're here to tell you, sadly, sometimes that is not what's going to fix the problem.
This episode is interesting to me. And I think I'm going to learn a lot in this episode, but I do think that it's very difficult to know when you've hit the limit and there's just nowhere else to go.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll say, as a therapist, here are the things that I tell people in the therapy room that, could you say this in a kinder way? Could you say it more calmly so that the person hears you differently? Could you use different wording? Could you use I statements? And sometimes my guidance to people around this ends up just making them more frustrated because when things don't change, then people just assume that they failed to communicate properly. And sometimes clarity doesn't really create change if the other person isn't willing or able to change. So let's look at some situations that communication does not actually fix.
These are big.
Yes.
And honestly, amazing how often people actually do stay in trying to change them.
Yes.
Addiction is one of the first ones. You can talk you can't talk them into sobriety.
No, if you are with someone who is an addict, you can tell them all day long how their behavior makes you feel. You can tell them how their behavior impacts you. You could tell them how dangerous it is for them to drink and drive. Like, you can talk until you're blue in the face and you can be a perfect communicator. Your communication is not going to fix that person's addiction.
One of the things that's I've been around someone in the past who's very skilled at communicating, and what I learned was that they could have an addiction issue, but if they owned it and then they could explain to me about that and how they manage it and what they do with that, then I have learned that then I don't need to be in the driver's seat. They're in the driver's seat. Versus me trying to untangle and figure out where the boundaries are and something like that. So that's a very interesting for me. I noticed that, like, I don't expect people to not have issues, and a lot of us have stuff there.
Yeah.
But I want to know that you understand that you have it and you own it.
Yeah. And I think that is often not the case. I would say much of the time that people are struggling with a true addiction, they're not acknowledging that that's a problem. They're like, I could quit anytime I wanted to, or I can handle it, or I don't drink that much. I only have a few drinks, that sort of thing. And again, this is a thing I see in my therapy office a lot, is someone trying to change their partner's use of substances by communicating differently. And it doesn't happen. So if you're beating yourself up for not communicating correctly when you're dealing with a friend or a partner or a relative who has an addiction, you can stop beating yourself up, because you communicating differently or better is not going to fix that problem.
Saying it louder is not going to help.
Yeah, just say it louder, then they'll stop.
Abuse is a huge one.
Yes. Oh gosh, it's interesting. Couples therapy is contraindicated in abusive relationships. So what that means, what that means is that if you are in a physically or emotionally abusive relationship, it is it is ill-advised to go to couples therapy, because what happens is an abusive partner is not playing by the rules.
Oh.
And the therapist can set out guidelines for you all day long, but that abusive person is just going to run right over the rules and do whatever they want. And so it ends up actually making the problem worse, and it can make the patterns more entrenched. And so what's recommended is that if each of those partners separately wants to go to therapy, like if the person on the receiving end of the abuse wants to go to therapy and learn how to take care of themselves differently, that is a great idea. But trying to go and negotiate and communicate better with your abusive partner, not recommended.
Super interesting. I did not realize
communication does not fix that. Well, if you think about it, if you're playing a game with someone who cheats, that person's going to win every time. Yeah. And so if you imagine therapy is kind of trying to teach you the rules of a game, and that other person's going to say, well, fuck the rules, I'm going to do what I want. Yeah, there's no winning in that situation. So yeah, communicating does not make that better. Another thing I would say, another situation in which communication isn't going to make things better is with someone who has an untreated mental illness. That, you know, if someone is struggling with a mental illness, you know, let's think of something like a chemical imbalance. Someone's depressed, or someone has bipolar tendencies, and their body chemistry is out of whack. It doesn't really matter how great you communicate with them. That underlying issue is going to supersede all the good communication in the whole world.
Yeah, I can buy into that completely.
Yeah.
And then someone who repeatedly violates boundaries.
Yep. Absolutely. Kind of, well, which I think actually would fall under the abuse category. Someone who's repeatedly violating your boundaries, you don't just need to restate the boundaries in a stronger way. Like, they're not going to respect those boundaries. And so, you know, if they understood what you were asking and they were willing to respect that, they already would have done it.
Yeah. You know, one thing I wanted to say about these things is that we are not being critical of people with substance use issues or mental health issues at all. That we believe that the people who do their work can live a very healthy, happy, and partnered life with those things in play. But the problem is, when you're out there trying to form significant relationships, is that you need to understand whether or not these folks have or are managing those things. The other thing that I think you have to be aware of in this whole communication is that if people have a pattern of either violating boundaries or they're abusive emotionally, and usually shows up in arguments, and they don't play fair, if they haven't done their work, there's a certain stake they have in keeping it in that hot spot. They're not necessarily wanting it to work out in the ways that you do, because it is a familiar. Don't you think it's sometimes the argument, the intensity is what they're seeking, because it's what they know and it feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. And I think it leaves the person on the other side of it feeling confused and hopeless and helpless. Like, I don't understand. I keep trying. I keep following the therapist's advice, and the situation's not getting better. It's because those things are part of the other person's pattern, And that doesn't mean that you're perfect or that you don't have a part in it, but you cannot fix someone's addiction by communicating better with them. You cannot fix someone's abusive patterns by communicating better. You cannot fix someone's untreated mental illness by communicating better with them. And so I think just getting clear on which problems are fixable by communicating differently and which ones are not.
Yeah. So it's kind of like me trying to slow down my language and say it louder to Lalo when we're in Mexico City. It's not really overly helpful. I mean, he smiles at me. He smiles at me.
He's trying real hard to understand. Yes.
He leads me to believe that we have reached an understanding, but I don't think we really have.
No, absolutely not. Yes, language barrier is another reason that communication doesn't necessarily work. You're speaking a different language. So if this is the case, why do you think people keep trying anyway to communicate?
Yeah. Well, human nature is interesting, isn't it? I mean, clinging on to hope. Just if I just say it right, I mean, maybe at the right moment, I'm catching them. You just hold on to hope that you can finally get through.
Yeah. Yes. And I see this pattern a lot in therapy, particularly around substance use, that I've seen kids, like adult kids, say, I've tried to tell my mom how her drug use impacts me, or I've tried to tell my dad that when he's drunk, I don't want to be around him. It's like, that's not a sign that your parent doesn't care about you. That is a sign that your parent has an addiction, and there's no convincing them, or it's not that your parent cares about that substance more than you, or your partner cares about that substance more than you, but you kind of keep clinging to this hope that if I just say it differently, then this person's going to change their behavior.
It is easily. I do think with kids and parents, don't you think that it is easy for a kid to think, if they really just love me enough, I need to be more important than the drug, than that's tough.
Gambling, the alcohol, whatever it is. I think it's true. I mean, people do that with their partners too. Like, if he really loved me, he wouldn't drink a 6-pack of beer when he comes home from work. It's like, well, he loves you and he's going to drink a 6-pack of beer when he comes home. Those two things are not, mutually exclusive. But I think people get scared that if they set a boundary, they're going to lose the relationship. If they say, hey, I don't want a partner who gets drunk every day, they're going to lose the relationship. Or if they say, hey, if you put your hands on me in a fight, I'm going to leave, then they're going to have to actually take that step and leave, and they're going to lose the relationship.
Yep. And that is opening yourself up to understanding your limitations in this sort of scenario does open you up to having to be honest with yourself that you may not be able to stay in.
Right. And people often don't want to uproot their whole lives, or lose a friendship, or disconnect from a parent, or whatever the relationship is. This isn't specific to partnership. And what happens is that I don't know if you guys know the term sunk cost bias, but basically what it says is if an investment into something, then you don't want to lose your investment. And so you don't want to walk away. So let's say you buy an old house and you put $100,000 into fixing it up, and then things still keep going wrong. So you put in another $50K, and then more things are going wrong. You're like, well, I'm already in it for $150K of repairs. I should put more in. And we keep pouring an investment into something that's never going to pay off. And we do that with relationships too. Like, man, I've been with this person for 10 years. I don't want to walk away now. It's like, well, if things aren't changing, what are you going to be saying when you've been in it for 20 years? And so we get caught up in that, like how much I've already got invested and I don't want to walk away.
I also think that it makes it, you look at it too, like, hey, I haven't made any of I've failed before this, and I'm determined to make this one work.
Yes. Yeah. And so we just keep staying. And, that's, I mean, I'll just say, as a general rule, I have a belief that if you're in a relationship, whether that's a job, a friendship, a romantic relationship, if you can get happy where you are, you should get happy where you are, rather than thinking that if you leave, that's what's going to make you happy. But if you've tried to get happy where you are and you can't get happy, then I think you have to consider the option of leaving.
Mm-hmm. I think so too.
Yep. I think that we as humans want to believe that people mean well. We want to believe in people's good intentions. And if someone tells you, I'll stop drinking, or I'll go get treated for my depression, or I will, go to therapy so I can stop being abusive, we want to believe they mean well. And often I think it's just best behavior that people say what they think we want to hear until the threat has passed, and then they go back to their old ways. And that's really hard because you don't want to give up hope on someone, but how many times are you going to believe what they tell you and then get disappointed because it didn't turn out to be true?
That's the $1 million question, is how many times, I
Yeah.
think. Because
Yep.
on one hand, you want to know that people can get better. And some people
Yes.
do the work and they change their behaviors.
Yep.
And then a lot of times they don't. And so how many times do you go through it? And how do you know when you've gone, okay, well, because I don't think there's a number, is there?
Nope. I don't think there's a number. Yeah. And I think there's that feeling of like, oh, if I could just make them understand this better, then I'm not going to have to leave. And so we keep trying to communicate differently when really this issue at its core isn't going to be solved just by good communication.
I like this this quote of, some issues aren't misunderstandings, they are patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That is
And
true.
if you continue to go, if your misunderstandings continue to have the same elements and you're just in this circular thing where you're really addressing the same things over and over again, that's a pattern.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And this one, I mean, gosh, I can tell you just so many situations with clients where, the client is partnered with someone who has a substance problem, and that partner keeps promising like, oh, okay, I won't do it anymore. I know this isn't good for me. I'm just going to stop. And then pretty soon they're, busting them again, like drinking on the sly or using drugs on the sly. I think or I promise, next time I get mad, I'm not going to put my hands on you, or I'm not going to say abusive things. And then when they get mad, they do it again. And it's like, you want to believe them when they say they're not going to do it again, but it's this person's pattern that they have to want to change. They have to get tired enough of their own pattern to change it. It's not because you communicate better with them that they're going to change.
And I think you will be met with, oftentimes they see each situation as different, when in essence
Yes.
they are the same.
Yeah.
So they will
This is
explain
totally
to
different
you
than last time.
exactly. It's like, no, it's not.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think really the heart of this episode is figuring out, like, what is the difference between feeling like you're being heard by someone and being safe, keeping yourself safe within your relationship. And I think that the person can listen to you, they can nod, they can agree, they can apologize, and then still not change.
Yeah. I was looking at some research on this one.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple of things that caught my attention that I thought were pretty interesting. One is, and this, you're familiar with these guys, but John and Julie Gottman, who do a lot of research in this area, that 69% of conflict within relationships are perpetual patterns.
Mm.
And that won't go away no matter how much you try to fix them. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, well, what the hell? Okay. So what do you do with that? No wonder I'm and
that's why you know girlfriend.
That's why I don't have a girlfriend. We always come back to that. What they talk about is that the differences in the people that are successful with that 69% of those perpetual problems stop trying to fix the problems and change the way that they view the problems within their relationship. And
That is so good.
Yeah. And it goes back a little bit to your comment about looking into your relationship to see if you can find the happiness there.
Yes.
Is that, I think it speaks a little to that, is that you're looking at that and you're going, okay, well, these things are going to keep, I mean, Joe's going to keep getting upset if you ask her about the mustard because she's going to think that you think she's squirreling it away.
If you didn't listen to our last episode, that's a little nod to our previous episode.
It was on shame and defensiveness. But anyway, the idea is that whatever those things are, that you have the ability within your relationship to reframe them so that they are not doing significant damage to you. And that was kind of the essence of it, is you kind of have to measure whether or not they're doing significant damage, and that has its own set of definitions, right? But that you're able to look at those things in a different light and still see that ultimately you feel happy in your relationship.
Yeah. And I think that is such a good reframe about small issues. Like, let's say your partner leaves their socks on the floor and that really drives you crazy. You weigh that out and you're like, is it really that big a deal? Do I need to walk away from this relationship because of the socks on the floor? Like, probably not. And so being able to say, how can I get happy, and be like, yep, that's my baby. They leave their socks on the floor, and roll with it. I think when we're talking about some of these bigger issues, that gets harder for a lot of people. And some people, like, for example, some people can stay in a relationship with an active addict and they just learn how to say, well, yep, that's what's happening, and I'm going to stick around. I think physical abuse is a little bit harder because you say, like, how many times, like, let's say your partner physically abuses you once a year. Well, that's 364 days a year that you're not being abused. Like, is that okay? So very small percentage of the time, when I'm glad you find that funny.
Good God.
I apologize for my partners laughing at a very sensitive issue.
But I'm like, damn, wake up, girl, and run.
We imagine, though, like, if somebody says they're in an abusive relationship, we imagine that their partner's knocking them around every day. That's almost never true. Mm-hmm. But what happens is, once or twice a year, there's a big blow up and that person grabs them by the shoulders and pushes them against the wall. Like, okay, yeah, that's only happening twice a year. Is that okay? Well, no, of course it's not okay. And so you have to figure out, is that a behavior that you could accept and get happy with? I mean, maybe. As a therapist, I wouldn't recommend that. But, some people stay because it's what they have to do to keep their kids safe, or they need both incomes to keep the household running. And so it's a trade-off that some people make. Like, okay, I'll live with someone who has an untreated mental illness or addiction or something. But like you said, there are a lot of problems that aren't going to get resolved. So you have to pick the ones that you can live with and then maybe decide that there are some that you can't.
It is hard to understand how the abuse, like really deep emotional abuse or physical abuse, would not. I believe that most of the time, those things continue to mount inside your system. And mm-hmm. So you think, okay, well, I've gotten past this first one, but when it happens again, it's just piling on top, and eventually your head's going to blow up,
Yeah.
There was also a different part of this conversation that I found in the research that really interested me. And that's about assumptions when you're trying to talk somebody into changing their behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
That you're assuming when you're doing that you are both working from the same shared conceptions, and that you're working from the same premise of values.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never thought about it that way. where I'm thinking, it seems very clear to me because let's use parenting as an example of like co-parenting in this, because this is kind of a deep thing. Like, we're not in agreement about whether or not so-and-so should have our kid should have certain freedoms, right? Well, we can't, and we're stuck like on a stalemate on that. Or let's just say a disciplinary action as a response to something they've done. As a parent, I may be working from the premise of my job as a parent is to make sure that my kid is socially acceptable and I keep them safe. And so what they've done is a big violation to the possibility that they've been socially unacceptable and they're not safe. And the punishment I want to deliver is based on that. Whereas my other person, their perceptions of their main role as a parent is to make sure that the child feels loved and that they don't feel hurt by anything you're going to do to them. Does that make sense? So if we come at a problem from those different sort of baseline perceptions of our role as parents, then it won't ever matter how loud I say it or how loud you say it. We're not arguing from the same context, from the
premise.
same
Yeah, we're not
concept.
speaking the same language. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of making sure that you're starting out on the same page. So if you're in a situation like this where communication isn't making something better, whether that has to do with abuse or addiction or mental illness or something that's not going to get fixed because you communicate better, you don't need better phrasing. You don't need to put in more emotional labor. You don't need another heart-to-heart talk, because that is exhausting everyone. I can tell you that right now. So let's talk about what does actually help. I think the first thing I would say is having really clear boundaries. And as we've said before, boundaries are not about changing someone else's behavior. So a boundary isn't telling someone you can't drink again. A boundary is saying, hey, when you hit your fourth drink, I'm probably going to go to bed because it's not easy for me to be around you. So it's telling someone what you will do in response to their behavior. That is the first thing I would say, is clear boundaries.
Observable behavior. I mean, if they just continue to, is that what you mean? It just continue to do it. I mean, you're watching them do.
Yeah. And so what I would say about observable behavior is that if you label something as abuse, like if I say, well, you're abusive to me, maybe my definition of abuse and your definition of abuse are two different things. But if I say, when you put your hands on me in an argument, that is observable behavior. Or if I say, you were drunk last night, well, maybe you don't think you were drunk. So if I say, I noticed that you drank a 6-pack of beer last night and your behavior changed after that, those are observable things. So that's not subjective. So try to say things that you actually have seen when you said A, B, and C, or when you did A, B, and C, as opposed to my subjective opinion is that you were abusive or you were drunk or whatever. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
like it.
Yeah. So try to talk about things that you can see. I think another thing that helps is if you talk about timelines. So meaning that you don't want someone to just be on best behavior for a finite amount of time until you stop being mad. What you want are sustainable behaviors that can last over a long timeline. And so just being clear that this isn't something I'm asking you to change temporarily. This is something that I'm asking, this is a behavior that's not going to work for me over the long haul.
This is good stuff. I mean, I'm learning as you're talking about this. I really am learning about interesting, very skilled ways of dealing with this.
Yeah. And as far as like setting a consequence, the consequences are related to boundaries. So you're not punishing someone, but you're just letting someone know if you do A, I'm going to do B. So the consequence of your actions is this is how I'm going to respond. And most of all, just make sure that you're getting support for yourself. Because if you're in one of these difficult situations, whether it's with a partner, a friend, a family member, you need to be able to talk to somebody about it, because it's easy to just say objectively, oh, just cut the person off, like just break up or don't be friends with them or don't talk to your mom anymore. But that's a really hard thing to do. And it may or may not even be called for. You don't have to necessarily end the relationship, but you do want to make sure you're getting plenty of support so that you know how to best respond to it.
Going back to consequence too, I just want to put out there that a consequence is different than a threat.
100%. A consequence is just the result of your action. Threatening does not work. So we'll just take that one off the table.
People confuse those things. And if you are threatening somebody, that is not giving them a clear idea of what you're going to do if things get outside of your comfort zone.
Right. And I would say most of all with threats, don't threaten to leave a relationship. That doesn't help anything. And if someone changes because you threaten to leave, that is not a sustainable change. And so, what I suggest to people is to say, this is probably not going to be sustainable for me over the long haul. That's different than I'm going to divorce your ass, But saying, I don't see our friendship lasting over the long haul, and here's why. But that doesn't mean I'm defriending you right now. So yeah, threats to end a relationship are really not good. So let's talk about some takeaways I want folks to get from this episode. The one that I would say first and foremost is that you can be a perfect communicator and still find yourself in a bad situation. So don't assume that if a relationship's not going the way you want it to, it's not necessarily because you're not being a good communicator.
And if something keeps happening, it's not a misunderstanding.
That's right. It's a pattern. And when you see patterns in people's behavior, believe them. Yeah.
Yep. Believe them for sure. And love doesn't require endurance. That's an interesting one, because we get a lot of messages that love, like, you need to hang in there, that there are rough patches, that you have hard, and sort of, I guess maybe you can kind of more clearly define the difference between having a healthy endurance with love and versus a unhealthy endurance with love.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time, the goal for relationships isn't that you're going to white knuckle it into eternity with someone. That sounds terrible. But the idea is, yeah, of course you're going to have rough patches, but if you see destructive patterns over and over again, I don't know that that's a sustainable situation, or that it should be a sustainable situation.
We all have, and we have talked a bit about this, we all have friends in our lives. Well, I say the two of us, we do, that we're going the distance with, and it hasn't always been easy. There have been some ups and downs, and I will just say, from my standpoint, when I look at those and deciding whether or not I'm going to go the distance with somebody, the measure that means the most to me is whether or not there is a tremendous amount of commitment to not hurting one another, and that we see one another, and that means more than winning an argument.
100%. That is absolutely true.
Then I can go through some rough patches with you, because I get to tell you, and I know that ultimately you would rather do anything than hurt me.
Yes, that means a lot. And to kind of follow that up, if someone keeps doing the same hurtful thing over and over, you don't have to stay. So I guess we're saying two sides of the same coin, that some relationships are worth weathering some rough times, because at the end of the day, you really care about each other and the relationship brings value to you. On the other hand, somebody can care about you and understand you, but if they keep hurting you in the same way over and over and over, that's probably not a helpful place for you to be.
It's not. And the other thing is that we also, in our relationships, I think if you do them wisely, certain ones have certain places in your life and certain values. And so I don't oftentimes feel like I need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and that I might move you into a different place in my life where those things that you do that are hurtful don't really impact me much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Like a concrete example of that would be if you're good friends with someone who has a substance abuse problem, you may choose to go see them for coffee at 10 in the morning before they start drinking or using. And you still get value out of that relationship, but you don't have to be around someone who's impaired. So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So if this is a topic that you want to chat about with someone in your life, whether that's your partner or your buddy, I think it's a helpful thing to explore. Where are you still trying to explain something to someone when it should have already been made clear? So are there relationships in your life where you just keep trying and trying to communicate better and the pattern is still repeating itself? And we would love to hear more about what you find out, or if you have found yourself stuck in one of these situations. Please email us info@dateableaf.com, or you can DM us on Instagram. We are at Dateable AF, and we really, really love hearing from you guys. So please share our podcast with your buddies. Please send us your feedback about the pod, because that's one of our favorite things, is hearing from you. As always, we want to thank you for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
And remember, be bold, be kind, and for the love of self-respect, don't text your ex. Stay dateable.
AF.